something that not everyone likes anymore, but it made every room and hall in the dungeon a chance for an encounter, giving the game not necessarily a grand story feeling, more like a video game or an arcade game like Pokemon, Gauntlet, Dark Cloud, Diablo. The story had a setup, and the grandness of it was discovered along the way, and wandering monsters made dungeons and wilderness grappling with tension. And that's what I want in my games. And every player in every game I have ever run that uses the Umbral Clock has benefited from this. We have a clock that counts down the more the players explore until the players trigger the encounter. Honestly, this is great for D&D, Call of Cthulhu, Shadowdark, Alien RPG, Draw Steel, the Cosmere RPG by Sanderson. The clock starts at 20, or 24 if you want a little bit more time. I jump between the two depending on the game. The players periodically roll an Umbral die, and what they roll is subtracted from the clock. When the clock reaches 0 or passes 0, an encounter is triggered and the clock resets to repeat the process. There's nothing that can stop the clock. The Umbral Clock represents the tension that grows in the background of the heroes' minds as they explore the underworld and the endless wilderness. Let's run a quick example of the clock. The clock starts at 20. I, a player, will have to roll on the clock when we explore a new room, 3 old rooms, if we linger too long in one place, or if we make too much noise. Typically the Umbral die that I have to roll is a D6, but the Umbral die grows to a D8, then again a D10, then a D12, and finally a D20. I roll the D6, let's say I get a 5. Well, the clock was at 20, so now it's at 15. Eventually another player will roll a D6, gets a 2, then the clock goes from 15 to 13, and so on until the inevitable and unpreventable 0. There are 3 ways for the dice to grow. Either you camp in the dungeon wilderness that you're exploring or traveling through. You choose to move quickly or run through the room, giving your presence away, meaning this gives some importance to moving stealthily. Then finally, the Umbral die will grow if you have a natural 1 on a Menace. Well, I'll explain what a Menace is in a second. But first, how do you shrink the Umbral die? Since it can grow in unsafe places, it's natural to assume it can shrink in safe places. Well, you'd be correct. There are 2 ways to shrink the Umbral die, and you might be lucky to shrink it down to a D4 temporarily. Resting for the night in a safe settlement, making taverns, camps, even bandit camps, or pirate ships, safe houses, to give the party some time while the Umbral Clock chills out. This also can provide a perfect opportunity for downtime and roleplay to learn more about the adventure, story, or puzzle. A second way to lower the Umbral die is by rolling a 3 on the Menace. There's that Menace thing again. Let's dive into that right now. Menace is a fun bonus mechanic inside the Umbral Clock. You see, if the Umbral Clock lands somewhere between a 4 and a 1, just before 0, the players get an Omen, where the GM gets to narratively reveal the encounter before it happens. And by the way, you can increase the Omen chance by 1 for every hireling NPC you have in the party, giving you a better chance, a better odds to survive. But if you get an Omen, players roll a D4 to see how menacing the Umbral Clock will be to them before it's too late. Rolling a 1 will increase the Umbral dice. Rolling a 2 or 3 will shrink the Umbral dice. Rolling a 4 will allow you to avoid the encounter and reset the clock, and everyone should work together to describe how they just barely avoided the encounter. So though it's named Menace, it really is a last chance to get out of the encounter opportunity. And honestly, that's the basics. Oh, I forgot. When resting and camping, it's important to find a safe, hidden place where monsters can't find you. That way you don't have to roll on the Umbral Clock while you sleep and run the risk of being surprised when you're prone and unconscious. Might be a good idea. It's not a heroic way to go. And it's also important for me to remind all the dungeon masters and game masters out there, peeking into a room and getting a simple description of like 3 things in the room doesn't trigger rolling the clock. Players have to choose to enter the room, so they have their agency first and foremost. Their agency, the player's choices, lead to the clock rolling. They can choose to linger, they can choose to move on. There are more things you can add that are inspired by older D&D editions or from Shadowdark. How far away is the monster when they spot them? What are they doing when they find them? Maybe they're eating, nesting, or even sleeping. Maybe you can even interpret their attitude. Are they hostile? Are they friendly? In the form of either action, social, and exploration. A dungeon master can prep a monster ahead of time. That's not a problem. Or they can have a list of possible monsters and NPCs that they are likely to be in this area, and they find out who the players meet along the way. There's no wrong way really to do that part. The Umbral Clock doesn't just have to be used for tension in a dungeon or wilderness. Its core clock system is extremely flexible. Does it lead to the weather changing? Does it lead to pilgrimages? Does it lead to a wandering castle? It's also perfect for a heist, and every time it hits 0, guards come by. You can even use it as a countdown in social encounters, representing patience, giving you a limited number of time to not just role play, but roll to convince them on an arc-changing or special plot event. Finally, if you want to see the Umbral Clock in action, I use it in my award-winning actual play Curse of Amity Island, and as well the follow-up adventure Lost Mine of Colossus. To be fair, it was in its early stages in those 2 games, and I called them the Underworld Clock. But in my next adventures, such as Cocaine Owlbear or A Knight's Tale, it becomes the final version of the Umbral Clock, named after the underworld of my original setting, Aida. It'll bring you endless tension and endless chaos on game night, and it will feel like you truly have an organic dungeon waiting for them to explore. Have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, and of course, good night. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.